Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Inside the Helmet, the number one sports related podcast in the world, according to myself. My name is Michael, and I will be your host on this fine Tuesday evening, coming to you a day early because I'm unable to record the episode tomorrow evening. So here we are. Today's also a solo episode. If you're brand new to the show, sometimes my dad will also join us as he is an avid sports fan and has extensive knowledge and history in playing and coaching alike. So he usually is able to provide some good insight and good discussion on the show. But regardless, I've got some great things to talk about on this episode here of Inside the Helmet. Again, thank you for joining. Let's get right into it. First off, Formula One. We had a race weekend this past weekend in Austria at the Red Bull Ring. That's where the R was coming from. And it was quite the doozy. So let's get right into it. The Red Bull Ring, of course, usually being the fastest lap on the calendar because of its short relative length, as well as the high speed nature of it, combining to give you some incredibly short lap times, meaning the margins are ever so fine compared to how fine they already are on any other track. Anyway, we go ahead to qualifying, and first off, so for anyone who's brand new to the show, I am a very massive Max Verstappen fan. And so a lot of my focus is going to be centered around him because so I watch and so I look out for most of the time anyway. Q2 comes around and Red Bull decided to send Max out for only one lap. And, this is kind of typical for the earlier qualifying sessions for the top teams to do, as they're expecting that they don't need to absolutely squeeze out every last 1% of lap time in order to simply advance forward to the final stage in qualifying. They just figure that, oh, we have the best car and some of the best drivers will cruise through qualifying while people with inferior machinery or inferior drivers or both will be the ones getting knocked out. Anyway, occasionally some of these inferior teams or inferior drivers show up to play. And this happened in the case of Pierre Gasly, who happened to be on an absolute flyer of a lap while Max Verstappen was sitting in the pit lane at the end of Q2 in P10. And Gasly was in the drop zone, which, if you're unfamiliar, qualifying in Formula One is broken up into three sessions. Q1, or qualifying number one, is where everybody is out there, and at the end, the bottom now six, with the addition of Cadillac being our second team, increasing the grid to 22 drivers. Now it's the bottom six drivers who get knocked out based on the slowest, fastest times. And then same principle in Q2, the next slowest six in Q2. They like all go back out again. The top 16 from Q1 go out again for Q2, and then they all set more lap times, and then same principle where the slowest six get knocked out, and then Q3 is the top 10 shootout. Anyway, it's typically imperative that if you want to get a result on Sunday, you have to make Q3 at least on a Saturday, typically. It's already very hard to win a race in Formula One. It's ever so harder to do so if you're starting outside the top 10. Anyway, so Max Verstappen sitting in P10 on the cusp of elimination at the end of Q2, and Pierre Gasly, who is the fastest man with the potential to knock him out, um, just narrowly by like 400ths of a second doesn't knock him out. So Red Bull's strategy team already kind of in shambles. Move ahead to Q3, and it's towards the end. Max is in like P5 or P4 or whatever. And he's towards the end of his what will be his final lap to have a shot at pole position, have a shot at the front row, at least the top three. And he's doing incredibly well. But then the Red Bull car, surprise, surprise, has a mechanical issue where the rear wing does not close. See, on a Formula One car now in 2026, they have a form of active aerodynamics with the front and the rear wing being able to go into straight mode, where they essentially the flap opens up to be more parallel to the ground to allow better airflow through it, which of course decreases downforce, meaning that you don't want to go through a corner where you need downforce to stay glued to the track, which is what makes Formula One cars the fastest in the world, by the way. It's not their outright top speed or their outright horsepower. Anyway, typically it's supposed to close when you get to the end of the straightaway section and where you need the top speed increase, and then into the corner it closes to give you downforce, which is what you need there. Anyway, his rear wing didn't close, and so he goes into the gravel and then into the wall, and his qualifying is over, obviously. Anyway, this erases the yellow flag, which becomes a double waved yellow flag. So a yellow flag already means, hey, slow down, caution, something's happened in this area, be careful. Don't go all out because you could also crash and make things worse. Anyway, double yellow means especially, hey, something really bad's happened here. Stop it. Like, chill out. Kimi Antonelli, the Mercedes driver, so George Russell, first off, he was also towards the end of his lap, not too far behind Max. He sees the yellow flags, and he, in his own words, he claims he lifted enough that he lost massive amounts of time. Yet, regardless of that fact, he shoots himself up from like P4 to pole position by 0.2 of a second ahead of Charles Leclerc, who was on provisional pole. Very strange. Kimi Antonelli, Russell's teammate, right behind him, also obviously saw the double wave yellow flags and actually slowed down and aborted his lap, as I believe Russell should have, because at the end of the day, regardless of what you think you're capable of or what you think your car is capable of, Max obviously didn't crash on purpose. It's not like he was trying to do that, and clearly if it was a car fault, there was nothing he could do about it. What if George had had the same exact issue happen to him and had a crash in the exact same way, in the exact same location, while Max was trying to get out of his car? It would have been absolutely catastrophic, and I think instead of going ahead with a mostly normal race weekend, we might be mourning the loss of Max Verstappen. I'm not talking about losing a race. So, regardless, this obviously sparked mass outrage among the Formula One community, minus Russell fans, who are all brain dead anyway, so who's going to listen to them? But regardless, race day comes, and Max's car is obviously all fixed up. I think he actually had a spare chassis on standby in case something happens. So he hopped in there and started from P5, which is like where he was before he had his crash anyway. So like he didn't lose any positions obviously for it. No one else was able to overtake him and out-qualify him that hadn't already. Anyway, race day comes and a few things happened. So it was blisteringly hot in Austria, and so much so that the Cadillac's brakes were catching fire. Both Cadillac cars were complaining.
Shopping for your next car?
What
What about a sunroof?
in the world? Okay, I apologize if you heard that. That was an advertisement that was playing on a Google Chrome tab that we're actually going to need here in just a little bit, because I've got something planned for the second half of this episode. I'm also going to very quickly. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program anyway. So it was very hot. Cars were having a lot of issues because obviously when heat gets to, over 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which is what it was down on the track, Anyway, cars are going to start to have issues. The Cadillacs are catching fire. Other cars are having mechanical issues. And among all this, the tires were obviously degrading very quickly, meaning there were a lot of pit stops. There was a very high level of tire degradation, which means that there's a much heavier advantage to cars on fresher tires that haven't worn down yet, and thus meaning you have to go slower because you don't have as much grip. Anyway, this caused a lot of chaos with the pit stop strategies. Ferrari tried to kind of make up their own strategy and not necessarily follow the rest of the pack, especially with Lewis Hamilton, like how they did the week before in Spain, which
Shopping for your
actually
next car?
allowed him to.
What
There's
about
another
third row
advertisement
seats?
playing. I'm just gonna close that. What is this? Stop playing. Okay, I apologize. Anyway, Ferrari had their usual strategy mess ups, and so that caused them to go from qualifying second and third to finishing like fifth and seventh. So Ferrari were out of it. Mercedes were obviously their very quick selves as usual. George was able to hold his lead off the line and fend off Charles and fend off Lewis and fend everybody else off. And he went on ahead to eventually claim victory. But it wasn't without some squabbles. Some squabbles, particularly with, well, strategy. Max ended up finishing second. He did end up battling a bit with Lewis, and he ended up having to fend off Kimi, charging at the very end, who ended up coming home in third, just behind. It ended up being a very, very tight battle at the end. Not even necessarily a battle, but kind of a hold your breath because George, at the end, had the highest level of degradation. He had been on his tires the longest, but as a result, he was in first because he had still been out there and maintained track position and whatnot. Max had
Shopping for your
pressure.
next car?
Goodness, these
What
stupid
about a sunroof?
advertisements need to go away. I'm I can mute. Yeah, mute that. All right. Apologies. So George had the most degraded tires, but he also had the best track position. He was in first, but he was going slower, meaning Max behind on fresher tires was catching him, and Kimmy behind Max on even fresher tires was catching both of them. And so it was this very interesting situation at the end of the race where you had all three drivers gunning for the win, and each one progressively behind had fresher tires and was going faster on track than the person ahead of them. And so in the end, Max finished like a second and a half behind George, and Kimmy finished like another 3/4 of a second or so behind Max. And it was a very interesting finish. But Red Bull probably threw away the win by not choosing to pit Max sooner to cover off George because by keeping Max out longer, hoping to extend his middle stint and then put him out on the medium tire, which could go to the end if they waited long enough. Um, but by waiting, they allowed Max's current tires to degrade so much that he just lost so much time to Russell, who had already pitted, that George was able to build out this massive gap ahead of Max once Max did eventually pit. But if they had pitted sooner, then Max would have come out with less of a gap to George, and if he was faster on track, he could have actually caught him. Regardless, though, it's still Max's best result of the season, and so is very, very selfish of me to act like a P2 is worth absolutely nothing. So good job, Max Verstappen, and screw you, George Russell. Um, anyway, here we go on to what has been making this noise throughout the episode so far. It's, well, let me show you. So right here, we have a tier list ranging from the best, really good, okay, don't watch, and boring. What am I going to be ranking today? Well, I've got a bunch of logos for professional sports organizations, some college, and what I'm going to be doing is, out of all these sports, these are just some of the like most popular sports in the world, to my knowledge anyway. And I'm going to rank them based on how fun they are to watch, how much I personally enjoy watching them. And well, I think it's important to get out of the way the ones I don't watch. So that is the professional tennis, National Hockey League, WWE, PGA, MLS, and I think all these I can at least formulate an opinion of. But I it would be unfair of me to criticize these sports without actually having watched them for any extensive period of time. And similarly, I am not in a position where I can, fudge it and make up something to try and sound interesting. So I want to be genuine here with this tier list. And so I want to go in order of what I've watched the least of, which is probably the World Cup, which is going on right now. And I've never been a big soccer fan. I never have. I much rather prefer American football to play, to watch everything. Just soccer never really appealed to me. But lately, with the World Cup going on and just seeing how much it means to people and all the excitement, I, as a general fan of sports and of competition, even if I don't fully get it, I don't know who the good teams are, who the good players are. I know Messi, I know Ronaldo, I know Pele, I know Mbappe, and that's just about it. Like I don't know the history, I don't know the teams, I don't know soccer. I don't know ball when it comes to soccer. But I can appreciate that it is something that so many people have just given their life to, the same way I have with football and more recently racing. So I will say that if I really wanted to sit down and watch soccer, I could really get into it. But for now, I'm going to say okay. I acknowledge that most people who are actually into it would put it somewhere up here, the best or really good. But I'm going to say okay. It is not bad. It is not boring. Even though I don't necessarily care for the game of soccer, the highs, I cannot ignore the fact that the highs are very high. And for that, I'll give it points. Next up, NASCAR. I don't know why the logo here is not fully shown off, but as I've been getting more into racing, obviously I've dabbled in watching a little bit of other racing series other than just Formula 1. And so NASCAR NASCAR is really good. For all the criticism that people say, oh, it's just people going around in circles over and over again, like, oh, turn left, turn left, turn left. Like, yes, I get it. Is it the most complex and complicated and windy track in the world? No. But there's a lot of overtakes. If you really get to know it, there's a lot of strategy and just people are always passing each other. And it genuinely feels like most people that are anywhere near the top, even just like in the top half, like any of them can end up winning. From the little I've watched, that's how it seems. And so NASCAR, it's really entertaining. Baseball. Baseball, baseball, baseball. It's okay. I feel like baseball is another one of those sports along with soccer that just that there's a lot of like potential. You spend so much time like hoping for something to happen. You like when you're watching soccer, the appeal is like, oh, they could score a goal at any time. Oh, they're like on this half of the field and they could, score a goal, and then everyone's gonna throw their arms up and be all excited. And similarly with baseball, it's like, okay, well, there's two runners on base, and you got this hitter with this batting average up to bat, and he's a swinger and he can hit in a country mile and all that. But then the majority of the time you're just kind of let down. From my experience, there's just so much standing around and so much of just nothing burgers. And so baseball, it's okay. College basketball. College basketball, some people say that like the NCAA tournament and all that, March Madness, it's the best sports time in the world. And for atmosphere wise, I think I might have to agree. But I gotta be honest, I've never made a bracket. I've never really sat down and watched the whole extensive amount of college basketball. But even still, basketball, I believe, is pound for pound the most entertaining sport to watch in the world, just because of the high volume of scoring and the high of it is just constantly like up here. And then you have your moments like towards the end of the games when it's like a buzzer beater where it's like way up here. But then every other sport has kind of a lower baseline excitement level. Like in football, for instance, you have, most plays, your 2 to 5 yard runs up the middle and all that. They're like just here. All right. But then, like, you score a long touchdown or have a pick six or something like that, and then it shoots way up here, but then it comes back down. It's like the highs are extremely, extremely high, but the baseline of just your monotonous, okay, 5 yard quick slant, 10 yard out, 3 yard run up the middle when you're in the middle of the field, it's not as high as basketball constantly back and forth. Okay, they're scoring. Now they're scoring. It's just a faster paced game, which gives for better content and better entertainment. Which is why I'm going to put the NBA up in real good as well, because similar principle, just the game of basketball as a whole is a very good product. Now, the big three, the three that will two that I've grown up watching, and the one that I've fallen in love with in the last 2.5 years. Let's start with college football. College football, there's some debate that, whether NFL or college football is better. For my money, the NFL is always going to be better. The players are better, all that. The teams are more recognizable. There's a little bit more consistency from year to year with like who are the good teams, who are the bad teams. It takes longer to rebuild. College football is still the best. It's still absolutely incredible to watch. It's football. You're watching a podcast that's about football and Formula One. What do you think I'm going to do? In fact, let me just cut right to the chase and say that this is my order for this tier. This is my order for this tier. This is my order for this tier. And then obviously, I don't watch these. So I'm unfit to give a proper assessment. But regardless, let me just talk a little bit about Formula One and the NFL because obviously they're the two sports I know the most about and I follow the most and can talk about the most. The NFL, obviously, is probably the thing I've watched the most of, granted. I'm a Cowboys fan, if you couldn't tell, so it's been a lot of heartache. But regardless, the NFL still churns out year in and year out. Just such an incredible product. It's the best sport in the world at the highest level. Like you the you could go watch years and years worth of NFL highlight videos on YouTube and you'd probably never get bored of them if you like unless you just don't like football. And then Formula 1, I mean, it's a bit strange. It's a bit strange. I think the most objectively exciting part of watching Formula 1 comes on a Saturday, not even during the race, because the racing, admittedly, I mean, because it's not a spec series, because it is as much an engineering sport as it is a driving racing sport, that there is a lot of discrepancy with like the good cars and the bad cars, and reliability is always an issue for some certain teams like Cadillac and Aston Martin at the moment, and Williams even. Anyway, so the discrepancy in like good cars versus bad cars means that the field is a lot more spread out. But when you get a good battle, like you get a real good battle, like what we saw between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton in Austria, that wasn't necessarily for the lead, but it was still for high positions. When you get a battle like, well, when you get a situation even like what we saw in Austria, where you have drivers closing in at massive rates because of tire degradation offset and all that, that keeps you on the edge of your seat like, oh my god, is Max gonna like come back and catch him? He's already closed a 5 second deficit in like 10 laps. Can he do it? Like that had me on the edge of my seat, for crying out loud. And then if you go back to Canada earlier this year before George before his engine went kaput. Like that little battle there between Kimmy and George for what would have been the race win was incredible. Constantly going back and forth. And as much as I've gotten on to being negative about the current regulations and all that, like I can't deny it's providing an entertaining and enticing product. As much as I absolutely hate all the EV crap and the hybrid crap, and as much as I want to go back to V10s or V8s for crying out loud, like I can't deny that at the end of the day, it's providing an entertaining product. I love that the cars are smaller, they're more agile, there's more room to overtake and go side by side. That's what you want in a racing series. And in any sport, you just want an entertaining product. And to me, Formula One's the most entertaining. That's my favorite sport to watch because I'm just so emotionally invested in it now. I'm such a big fan of it. I'm such a big fan of the drivers and the teams and all that that I can't look away. I can't bring myself to intentionally disregard and leave it alone and not watch it so long as I'm able to. But that's my ranking. I would love to hear you guys' ranking in the comments for what you guys think are the most entertaining and exciting sports. I could come back and like do more research and like kind of rank them more objectively based on general public opinion, but this is my opinion for now. But let me know if you guys want to see more sort of ranking type videos like this on the podcast and different segments as well that you guys want to see. Be sure to leave recommendations in the comments. Those are always welcome, as are any questions that you might want us to answer on the show on any given episode. But that's all for now. Thank you as always for tuning in to Inside the Helmet. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. I'll see you guys next time.